The oppressive purple nebula swirled outside the viewport, its ethereal beauty a stark contrast to the grim reality within the bridge of the Icarus. Captain Eva Rostova, her face etched with the weariness of countless near-death experiences, stared out at it, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Around her, the bridge crew, a motley collection of humans from across the shattered remnants of Earth's spacefaring legacy, were a symphony of controlled tension. "Scanners are locked, Captain," Lieutenant Jian declared, his voice clipped and professional. "Analyzing the energy signature. It's unlike anything we've encountered before. Fluctuating, complex, woven into the very fabric of spacetime." Architect signature confirmed. Dr. Eris Thorne, the team's resident astrophysicist and a man whose brilliance was only surpassed by his eccentricity, chimed in, adjusting his thick spectacles. "This is it. Trial 9. The one that's rumored to wipe out entire star systems just for failing to understand the question." The architect. The name sent shivers down the spines of even the most hardened veterans of the Galactic Empire. A force of unimaginable power, its motives utterly inscrutable, it had unleashed the great filter upon the galaxy, a series of deadly trials that culled species after species, leaving behind only echoes of civilizations that had failed to pass its unfathomable judgments. The Galactic Empire, a vast, sprawling bureaucracy built on rigid protocols and military might, had been the first to fall victim to the architect's wrath. Their vast fleets, their advanced weaponry, their unwavering obedience to the chain of command, all proved useless against the architect's unpredictable challenges. They crashed against its trials like waves against a cliff face, their numbers dwindling with each devastating loss. But humanity, scrappy, adaptable, and stubbornly resistant to extinction, had somehow managed to survive. Not because of superior technology or overwhelming force, but because of their inherent ability to improvise, to think outside the box, to fail spectacularly and then pick themselves up and try again. And Eva Rostova, a woman forged in the fires of the Great Filter, was at the spearhead of that survival. "All right, people," Eva said, turning from the nebula, her voice firm and resonating with a quiet confidence. "We know the drill. Expect the unexpected." "Eris, what are we looking at?" Eris tapped a series of commands on his console, bringing up a holographic projection that filled the bridge with swirling patterns of light and color. "The preliminary scan suggests a construct of immense scale, Captain. A Dyson sphere, but unlike any we've seen. Its surface is constantly shifting, reconfiguring itself in ways that defy our understanding of physics. And there are anomalies. Subtle deviations from the expected patterns. Gaps, inconsistencies. It's as if the architect is leaving breadcrumbs." "Breadcrumbs?" Jian raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "You think the architect is intentionally making this easier?" "Not easier, Jian," Eva interjected. "Perhaps, more comprehensible. It's always been our ability to understand, to adapt, that has allowed us to survive this far. Maybe that's what the architect is looking for." The Icarus plunged into the nebula, its shields shimmering as they fought off the strange energy fields that permeated the area. The Dyson sphere loomed ahead, an impossible structure that dwarfed even the largest planets. As they approached, the surface of the sphere began to shift, forming intricate geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with an inner light. "Captain, incoming transmission." Lieutenant Mara, the communications officer, announced, her voice tinged with a hint of fear. It's not a transmission in the traditional sense. It's more like a projection. A series of images and symbols flashing across our screens." The bridge was flooded with a chaotic collage of images, swirling galaxies, collapsing stars, intricate biological structures, abstract mathematical equations. It was overwhelming, seemingly random, yet Eva felt a strange sense of familiarity, a sense that there was a hidden order within the chaos. "Decrypt it, Mara," Eva ordered. Give me something I can understand. Mara worked furiously at her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It's fragmented, Captain. The signal is heavily distorted. But I'm getting glimpses of something. A language, maybe. But unlike any language we've ever encountered. The images continued to flash, accompanied by a cacophony of sounds that resonated deep within the bones of the crew. It was a sensory overload, designed to overwhelm, to break down. Most species would have succumbed at this point, their minds shattered by the sheer complexity of the architect's communication. But Eva's team was different. They had faced the impossible before, and they had learned to adapt, to find order in the chaos. Eris, his eyes gleaming with excitement, began to shout out equations, scribbling furiously on a holographic notepad. Jian, his military training kicking in, methodically catalogued the images, looking for patterns and repetitions. Mara, her brow furrowed in concentration, worked tirelessly to decipher the fragmented language. And Eva, standing at the center of the bridge, felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. She closed her eyes, letting the chaos flow through her, allowing her subconscious to make connections that her conscious mind couldn't grasp. I think I'm seeing something, Eris said, his voice trembling with excitement. The patterns, they're not random. They're based on prime numbers, on the Fibonacci sequence, on fundamental constants of the universe. It's like the architect is communicating on the deepest level possible, using the very language of reality itself. Mara, any progress on the language? Eva asked. Mara nodded, her face pale but determined. I've managed to isolate a few key symbols, Captain. They seem to represent concepts. Life, death, entropy, creation. But there's something else. A symbol that keeps recurring. I can't quite decipher it, but it seems to be related to choice. Moral choice, perhaps. Eva's eyes snapped open. Moral choice. You think the architect is testing our morality? It fits, Captain, Eris said. We've noticed patterns in the trials. They're not just about physical survival. They often present us with ethical dilemmas, disguised as tests of strength. The architect seems to be judging us not just on our ability to survive, but on our willingness to do what's right, even when it's difficult. Eva considered this. It made sense. The Galactic Empire, with its rigid adherence to established protocols, had always prioritized efficiency and obedience over empathy and compassion. Perhaps that was why they had failed. They had failed to understand that the architect was not just testing their strength, but their character. All right, people, Eva said, her voice firm. We need to figure out what the architect wants. What is it asking us? The Icarus continued to navigate the ever-shifting landscape of the Dyson sphere, dodging energy bursts and avoiding gravitational anomalies. As they delved deeper into the construct, the trials became increasingly complex, both physically and ethically. They were forced to make impossible choices, to sacrifice one thing for another, to weigh the value of individual lives against the survival of the many. In one trial, they encountered a dying alien civilization, trapped within a decaying biodome. The architect presented them with two options: use their limited resources to save the aliens, or use them to repair the Icarus and escape the trial. Saving the aliens would almost certainly mean their own demise. Escaping would condemn the aliens to certain death. The decision tore the team apart. Some argued that their primary responsibility was to their own survival, that they couldn't afford to sacrifice themselves for a dying race. Others argued that it was their moral duty to help those in need, even if it meant risking their own lives. Eva listened to the arguments, weighing the pros and cons, the risks and the rewards. In the end, she made a decision that surprised even herself. "We're going to try to save them," she announced. "But we're not going to blindly throw ourselves into a suicide mission. We're going to use our ingenuity, our resourcefulness, to find a way to save both them and ourselves." They spent days working tirelessly, scavenging for resources, designing makeshift repairs, and improvising solutions to seemingly insurmountable problems. They faced setbacks and disappointments, moments of despair and frustration. But they never gave up. They refused to accept defeat. And in the end, they succeeded. They managed to repair the biodome, stabilize the aliens' life support systems, and find a way to escape the trial with the Icarus intact. It was a near impossible feat, achieved through a combination of skill, determination, and a willingness to take risks. As they emerged from the trial, they felt a sense of exhaustion, but also a sense of accomplishment. They had faced a difficult moral dilemma, and they had chosen the path of compassion, even at great personal risk. But the trials were not over. They continued to face challenges, each more difficult and more complex than the last. They learned to anticipate the architect's moves, to decipher its hidden messages, to understand its underlying logic. They learned that the architect was not just testing their physical strength, but their mental acuity, their emotional intelligence, and their moral compass. And then, they arrived at the final trial. It was a monumental structure, a vast, crystalline labyrinth that seemed to stretch on forever. At the center of the labyrinth was a single, pulsating orb of light. "This is it, Captain," Eris said, his voice hushed with awe. "The heart of the architect's construct. The final judgment." As they entered the labyrinth, they were confronted with a series of illusions and distortions. They saw visions of their past failures, their deepest fears, their most painful regrets. The labyrinth seemed to be designed to break them, to drive them to despair, to force them to give up. But they persevered. They supported each other, encouraging each other, reminding each other of their shared purpose. They refused to let the illusions defeat them. And then, they reached the orb of light. As they approached the orb, it began to pulsate faster, emitting a blinding light and a deafening sound. The air crackled with energy, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy surge," Jian yelled. "We need to get out of here." But Eva stood her ground, her eyes fixed on the orb. She felt a strange sense of connection to it, a sense that it was trying to communicate with her. "Wait," she said. I think I understand." She closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind, trying to connect with the orb. And then, it happened. She saw a vision. She saw the universe, vast and infinite, filled with countless stars and galaxies. She saw the birth and death of stars, the formation of planets, the evolution of life. She saw civilizations rise and fall, empires crumble and decay. And then, she saw something else. She saw a threat. A cosmic threat, lurking in the shadows, slowly but surely consuming the universe. A threat that was beyond their comprehension, beyond their ability to fight. And she understood. The architect was not a destroyer. It was a protector. It was seeking a species capable of understanding the threat, capable of finding a way to stop it. The Great Filter was not a test of worthiness, but a desperate attempt at finding a solution. The trials were designed to identify a species that was not only intelligent and resourceful, but also compassionate and ethical. A species that was willing to sacrifice itself for the greater good. A species that was capable of working together, of overcoming its differences, of finding common ground. And she realized that humanity, despite its flaws and its failures, was that species. But it wasn't enough to simply understand the threat. They had to communicate their understanding to the architect. They had to show it that they were capable of finding a solution. Eva opened her eyes, her face illuminated by the light of the orb. She turned to her team, her voice ringing with conviction. "We know what the architect wants," she said. "It's not enough to just survive. We need to show it that we understand the threat, that we're willing to fight for the survival of the universe." She paused, taking a deep breath. "We need to show it that we're worthy." And then, she did something that no one expected. She stepped forward, towards the orb, and she began to speak. She didn't speak in any known language. She spoke in the language of emotions, of empathy, of compassion. She spoke of their hopes and their fears, their dreams and their regrets. She spoke of their love for each other, their dedication to their cause, their unwavering belief in the power of humanity. She spoke from the heart, pouring out her soul into the orb. And as she spoke, the orb began to resonate with her energy. The light grew brighter, the sound grew louder, and the ground beneath their feet trembled even more violently. It was as if the architect was listening, absorbing her words, understanding her message. And then, it happened. The orb pulsed one last time, emitting a blinding flash of light. And then, it went silent. The labyrinth disappeared. The energy fields dissipated. The illusions vanished. They were standing in an empty space, surrounded by nothing but stars. And then, a voice spoke. It was not a voice that they could hear, but a voice that they could feel, resonating deep within their minds. "You have understood," the voice said. "You are worthy." And then, the voice was gone. The Icarus was transported back to their starting point, outside the Dyson sphere. The nebula swirled around them, as beautiful and as dangerous as ever. They had passed the final trial. They had proven their worth to the architect. They had saved humanity, and perhaps even the universe. But their journey was far from over. They now knew the nature of the cosmic threat, and they knew that they had a responsibility to fight it. They had been chosen. They were the hope of the galaxy. As the Icarus turned and sped away from the Dyson sphere, heading towards the unknown depths of space, Eva Rostova smiled. The architect's secret was out. And humanity was ready to face the challenge. Years later. The change was subtle at first. The trials became less frequent. Less deadly. It was as if the architect, having found what it was looking for, was beginning to ease up on the rest of the galaxy. Eva Rostova, now an admiral in the newly formed Galactic Federation, stood on the bridge of the Daedalus, flagship of the combined human and allied alien fleet. The scars of the past battles were still visible on her face, but her eyes held a newfound sense of hope. The Federation, born from the ashes of the old empire and the shared experience of surviving the Great Filter, was a testament to human ingenuity and diplomacy. Species that had once been bitter rivals were now working together, sharing knowledge, and pooling resources to face the cosmic threat. The key to their success had been the understanding of the architect and its fragmented language. Dr. Eris Thorne, now a galactic celebrity, had dedicated his life to deciphering the architect's messages, unlocking the secrets of its technology, and developing new ways to combat the encroaching darkness. They had learned that the threat was not a single entity, but a force of entropy, a fundamental law of the universe that was slowly but surely unraveling the fabric of reality. It manifested in different ways across the galaxy, from collapsing stars to decaying planets to corrupted civilizations. The Federation, using the knowledge gained from the architect, had developed new technologies to counteract the effects of entropy. They had learned to manipulate spacetime, to harness the power of dark matter, and to create artificial wormholes that could transport entire fleets across vast distances. But technology alone was not enough. They had also learned the importance of compassion, of empathy, of understanding. They had learned that the greatest weapon against the darkness was not brute force, but the power of connection, the ability to unite and inspire. Eva had traveled to countless worlds, meeting with leaders of different species, sharing her experiences, and urging them to join the Federation. She had faced skepticism, resistance, and even outright hostility. But she had never given up. She had always believed in the power of unity, in the ability of different species to come together and create a better future. And slowly but surely, she had succeeded. The Federation had grown from a small group of survivors to a vast and powerful alliance, spanning across hundreds of star systems. They had built a network of defenses, a system of early warning systems, and a fleet of warships capable of facing the encroaching darkness. But the fight was far from over. The threat was always lurking, always evolving, always finding new ways to undermine their efforts. They had suffered losses, setbacks, and moments of despair. But they had never lost hope. They had always believed that they could win, that they could save the universe. One day, a new anomaly was detected on the edge of the galaxy. A massive energy surge, unlike anything they had ever seen before. "Admiral, we're detecting a massive energy signature on the galactic rim," Lieutenant Jian, now a seasoned officer, reported from his station on the Daedalus. It's like the architect is reappearing." Eva's heart skipped a beat. The architect had been silent for years, its purpose seemingly fulfilled. Why was it returning now? "Analyze the signature, Jian," she ordered. "Tell me everything you can find." Jian worked furiously at his console, his fingers flying across the keyboard. It's not the architect, Admiral. It's something else. Something bigger. Something darker. The anomaly grew stronger, spreading like a virus across the galaxy. Planets began to crumble, stars began to collapse, and civilizations began to fall into chaos. The Federation launched a desperate defense, sending its fleets to the front lines, trying to contain the spread of the anomaly. But it was no use. The darkness was too powerful, too relentless. Eva knew that they were facing their greatest challenge yet. They had fought against entropy, against the forces of decay, against the architect's trials. But this was different. This was something else entirely. This was like facing the void itself. She gathered her council, the leaders of the Federation, to discuss their next move. The mood in the room was grim. Hope was beginning to fade. "We're losing, Eva," said Ambassador Zyler, a representative of the KRYLL species. "We can't stop it. The darkness is too strong." "We can't give up," Eva replied, her voice firm. "We've come too far. We've fought too hard. We have to find a way to win." "But how?" asked Grand Admiral Theron, a veteran of the old empire. "We've tried everything. Nothing seems to work." Eva thought for a moment, her mind racing. She remembered the vision she had seen in the heart of the architect's construct. She remembered the threat, the cosmic force that was slowly consuming the universe. And then, she had an idea. "The architect," she said. "We need to find the architect. It knows the answer. It knows how to stop the darkness." Her council looked at her with disbelief. "The architect is gone, Eva," said Zyler. "It left us years ago. It's not coming back." "We have to try," Eva said. "It's our only hope." She ordered the Daedalus to set course for the last known location of the architect, the Dyson sphere where they had faced their final trial. It was a long and dangerous journey, through treacherous space, past collapsing stars, and around black holes. But they persevered. They overcame every obstacle, every challenge, every setback. They refused to give up. And finally, they arrived at their destination. The Dyson sphere was still there, an impossible structure that dwarfed even the largest planets. But it was different now. It was darker, more menacing, more, corrupted. Admiral, I'm detecting a massive energy surge emanating from the sphere, Jian reported. It's like it's under attack. Eva knew what she had to do. She ordered the Deadless to approach the sphere, despite the danger. As they approached, they were confronted by a swarm of corrupted drones, beings of pure energy that were controlled by the darkness. The Deadless engaged the drones in battle, its weapons firing, its shields shimmering. The battle was fierce, but the Deadless was outmatched. The drones were too numerous, too powerful. We're taking heavy damage, Admiral. Jian yelled. Our shields are failing. Eva knew that they were running out of time. She made a decision. Prepare a boarding party, she ordered. We're going to board the sphere. We need to find the architect. She gathered her team, including Eris Thorn, who had insisted on joining her. They prepared to board the sphere, knowing that they were facing certain death. As they boarded, they were attacked by more corrupted drones. They fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. One by one, her team members fell. Eva fought on, her heart filled with grief, but her determination unwavering. She knew that she had to keep going, that she had to find the architect. Finally, she reached the center of the sphere. She found the orb of light, the heart of the architect's construct. But it was different now. It was dark, corrupted, pulsing with a malevolent energy. And then, she saw it. The architect. It was not the benevolent being that she had imagined. It was a twisted, distorted version of its former self, corrupted by the darkness. You have failed, the architect said, its voice filled with malice. You could not stop the darkness. Now, the universe will be consumed. Eva looked at the corrupted architect, her heart filled with sadness. She knew that all was lost. But then, she remembered something. She remembered the vision she had seen in the heart of the architect's construct. She remembered the cosmic threat, the force of entropy that was slowly consuming the universe. And she realized that the architect was not the solution. It was the problem. The architect, in its attempt to protect the universe from entropy, had inadvertently created the very thing it was trying to prevent. It had become so focused on preserving order that it had stifled creativity, innovation, and change. It had created a rigid, stagnant universe that was ultimately doomed to decay. The darkness was not an external force. It was an internal one. It was the inevitable consequence of stagnation, of the failure to adapt, of the refusal to embrace change. Eva understood now. The solution was not to fight entropy, but to embrace it. To accept change, to adapt to new challenges, to create a universe that was constantly evolving and renewing itself. She looked at the corrupted architect, her eyes filled with compassion. You were wrong, she said. The answer is not to control the universe, but to let it go. To let it evolve, to let it change, to let it die and be reborn again. And then, she did something that no one expected. She reached out her hand, and she touched the corrupted architect. As she touched it, a surge of energy coursed through her body. She felt pain, agony, and a sense of overwhelming loss. But she also felt something else. She felt hope. She felt love. She felt compassion. She poured all of her energy, all of her emotions, all of her being into the corrupted architect. She showed it the beauty of the universe, the power of connection, the importance of empathy. And then, something miraculous happened. The darkness began to recede. The corrupted architect began to transform. The light returned to the orb. The architect was free. Thank you, the architect said, its voice filled with gratitude. You have saved me. You have saved the universe. And then, the architect was gone. Eva collapsed, her body drained of energy. She knew that she was dying. But she was not afraid. She had done what she had to do. She had saved the universe. As she lay dying, she saw a vision. She saw the universe, vast and infinite, filled with countless stars and galaxies. She saw the birth and death of stars, the formation of planets, the evolution of life. But this time, she saw something different. She saw a universe that was constantly changing, constantly evolving, constantly renewing itself. She saw a universe that was filled with creativity, innovation, and hope. She saw a universe that was truly alive. And then, she closed her eyes and smiled. Eva Rostova was dead. But her legacy lived on. The Galactic Federation continued to thrive, embracing the principles of change, adaptation, and empathy. The darkness was contained, the threat was averted, and the universe was safe. Humanity had found its purpose. It had become the guardian of the galaxy, the protector of the universe, the beacon of hope in the face of darkness. And it all began with a single team, a single captain, and a single question: what does the architect really want? The answer, they discovered, was not what anyone expected. It was the freedom to evolve, the courage to change, and the compassion to embrace the unknown. The Great Filter, in the end, had chosen those who understood this simple truth. The architect, in its inscrutable way, had been searching for a species that could let go, and in letting go, find true strength.